Well, hi, my name is Zaira. I am hosting this podcast. This is Complex Like Wine, and this is the podcast where we talk about complicated things like wine. So this week we have a special guest, Anna Clark, and I met Anna from school, and I'll get more into her and what we're going to talk about this week. But before we do, I'm going to talk about this week's wine. So I'm holding up the bottle here. It's a 2019 Syrah Cateau by Sharon Weeks from Paso Robles. And I'll do a little bio on her and how they describe the wine. Sharon is a custom crush winemaker who has been making wines from other winemakers and wineries for the last 15 years on the Central Coast in California. Prior to that, she spent a solid 18 years working for a mega brand, Constellation Wines. Her husband was a fellow winemaker and got a promotion that involved moving the family onto a winery, and Sharon laced up her own boots in winemaking. And so how they describe the wine is that the Syrah is juicy and ripe, full of rich flavors like cherries, plums, and wild brambly blackberries. This champion wine hails from the heart of Paso Robles and is Sharon's home base of a region famous for extreme temperature swings and a long grain season. And this is an award-winning wine. So very excited to have this wine here this week. I'm going to try a little bit. Definitely very delicious. You can definitely taste all the berries. Kind of a little bit of a spice, but I really enjoy this. And now we're just going to go ahead and continue with Anna. So I met Anna from school. We met in a film class, it would have been the How to Watch a Movie Like a Pro.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. And at the time you were a film major, but now you have gone into social work, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. How do you like that?
I really enjoy it. I'm really passionate about what I do through the social work program. So I'm really excited just to continue pursuing social work in the future.
That's great. And can you tell me more like how you got into wanting to do social work?
Mm-hmm. So I've always had a love for advocacy and for human rights and just learning more about policies and different pieces of legislation. And that's part of what I want to do through social work, through macro social work, which is working with organizations and communities to create change.
I love that. That's really great. I think with social work, you need to have a special kind of empathy, soul for others, and be really genuinely passionate about wanting to help people and making a better place with human rights and different social issues. So that's really fantastic. On your social media, I can tell you're very passionate and you're always posting about really important things that need to be discussed.
Thank you. Engaging in that conversation is the first start to creating change.
Oh, 100%. And that's exactly why I wanted to create this podcast, to just have those conversations with like a peer setting or with maybe generational differences. And I think having a space is one of the first steps to do that.
Absolutely.
When I first reached out to you, you mentioned wanting to discuss on topics of people with learning disabilities. Can you go more over that for us?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of different learning disabilities that people and individuals are diagnosed with. And so when individuals are diagnosed, it can be challenging to really understand what's going on in your body and your mind and developmentally. And so it's definitely interesting because through my social work program, I've learned potential resources for clients that I can work with in the future. And with that, there also comes a lot of stigma. And with that stigma, it's often seen or to most people, it's usually not visible. It's not seen when someone does have a learning disability. Sometimes it may be visible, but it may not be at times as well. And so individuals who do have learning disabilities may feel that their journey is like they're going through their journey alone. But I really want to encourage people that through this journey that they're going through with their learning disability, they're not alone. There's definitely resources and support that people can receive.
Absolutely. When you brought up the conversation, I was really excited to learn more about it because I
Mhm.
personally don't know much when it comes to the broad umbrella of different learning disabilities. The only thing I'm kind of aware of when it comes to the autism spectrum, girls are usually diagnosed much later than boys because the basis of diagnosis is only based on data with boys with
Mhm.
autism.
Mhm.
So I think that within the autism spectrum, I'm assuming for females is really hard because you can go probably to your teens or maybe a little older and have no idea that you're on the spectrum. And maybe earlier you would have been able to get the help or aid you needed and it would have been easier at school or different activities.
Mhm. Yeah, and quite honestly, I think not only with disabilities such or diagnoses such as autism, I think that that also goes for other learning disabilities as well. I know that there's a learning disability, nonverbal learning disability, and so it's called NVLD for short. And this learning disability, it also can be diagnosed or found later on in life in individuals, and so when someone does find out that they have it, it's an interesting dynamic to try to balance and figure out for that individual because they may be feeling like this wasn't found earlier when they were younger, or it's something that they've been struggling with in school or academic or wherever it may be in their lives, but it's not found until later on, which can be a tricky situation for that individual and for their family.
Oh, I could only imagine how difficult it is, especially when it comes to like let's say academics. You're little,
Mhm.
you might need certain adjustments in your teaching style and learning
Mhm.
style, and you're unable to really identify or label what that is. I
Mhm.
can imagine it could only set you back or make you feel ostracized from peers and
Mhm.
classmates.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely part of it, and I think that that goes back to what we said in the beginning about stigma surrounding
Mm.
learning individuals with learning disabilities. And I think it's really important to um, engage in this conversation because it creates that awareness in our community. It creates the awareness in individuals that may know someone who has a learning disability, or they themselves may have a learning disability, or whatever the case may be. Just knowing and I guess encouraging others that um, that this doesn't define them. This isn't who they are. It's simply a diagnosis or something that they have with them that that they may struggle with. Or we all have something that we struggle with in life, and so it looks different for everybody.
Mhm. Is there organizations or studies that you would like to mention that are really helpful with people with learning disabilities if they're not yet aware of
Mhm.
resources to help get help with?
Mhm. So, primarily, one organization that comes to mind is the NVLD project, and NVLD again stands for Nonverbal Learning Disability. And this organization really strives to empower and encourage the community of individuals who have learning disabilities, and especially with nonverbal learning disability, this organization provides academic like assessments and tools and different resources for children and families and adults. So it's a great organization that I really enjoyed learning about through social work and just in my own time to really just put myself in someone else's shoes and being able to empathize with someone who uh,
Mhm.
of this learning disability.
Mhm. Now, one of the other topics that you said you would like to touch on was kind of self-love talk and like healthy conversation with yourself. How would you
Mhm.
say those two are interconnected?
Mm. That's a great question. I think that especially within social work, it's really easy to get caught up in negative self-talk, and not with social work but with anybody in general, really. It's when you're in a career that's working to help people, and you're constantly surrounded by these social issues and real world problems. It's really important when you think about um, how we talk to ourselves, or how we lean into those conversations, or how we learn to love and accept ourselves. That's, I think, how they're interconnected, is that someone who may have a learning disability, it may be extremely hard for them to come to terms with the fact that they have been diagnosed with a learning disability. And that's, it's not easy to hear, or to be diagnosed with a learning disability. But what I really want to encourage people is just that, like I mentioned, is that we're not defined by the things that happen to us, or that we're not defined by our external circumstances in which we can't control. So that's just something that I really try to live my life by, is that we aren't defined by the things that take place in our lives. If that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I think you can even, whatever bubble you've been placed in, you can use that as fuel. Like, use that to
Mhm,
your advantage. You can say you're with learning disabilities, maybe you've been diagnosed with depression, any type of mental health,
mhm,
or something even larger or smaller. It's now you have the opportunity to kind of own that. And maybe that's your way of helping others in the same
mhm,
situation, I think.
mhm, exactly. And I think just hearing you say that, that's honestly one thing that kind of drew me to social work, is that um, in the times where I've struggled, I wish someone was there to support me through that, just like I want to support my future clients in social work. So
Mhm.
almost comes full circle around. Mhm.
That's great. Now, let's talk more about kind of self-love.
Mhm.
Have you gone through a journey where you've learned how to have those healthy conversations with yourself? Have you gone through an experience like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in social work, we really focus a lot on being self-aware, and doing self-assessments, or really reflecting on maybe our personal biases that we may have, or whatever kind of internal talk that we tell ourselves. And sometimes I find that, for me personally, that sometimes gets in the way of um, doing effective work with my clients through my internship through the social work program this year. So it's definitely a journey of learning to give yourself grace. I think giving yourself grace, and being able to say, today maybe I didn't get everything done that I needed to, but it doesn't mean the world stops spinning. So it's something that just it's really focused on mindset, and how that internal talk can be really positive, or it can be really negative. Um,
Mhm.
so when we build ourselves up, it's it, it can give us motivation. It can give us, it can lead to more success in our life. But it's also easier said than done. Being real, it's being real and authentic is something I really strive to be. And it's hard to have these conversations at times, whether it's with our peers or whether it's with ourselves. It's something that definitely requires a lot of just like self-awareness, being reflecting on things that you've been through, and how you can continue building yourself up.
Mhm. Do you like to read?
I do.
Okay, have you heard of the book Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so I read it recently, and it's all
Hmm.
about learning how to be self-compassionate with yourself and having a healthy conversation with yourself. And oh my goodness, it has actually like changed my life because I I'm the type of person where I'm really hard on myself. I've always put like a tremendous amount of pressure on everything I do, very intrusive thoughts. It just ends up being a cycle. And after reading that book, it's really enlightened me on how having nice conversations with yourself and being kind to yourself is actually so much more beneficial than trying to trying to like hammer yourself on everything.
Hmm.
I would recommend that book if you're ever curious, and to
Yeah.
anyone else that's listening that kind of struggles with self love or self talk. That book is really eye opening.
Wow. Yeah. No, I would love to read that and gain some more insight on that.
Yeah, her whole point is kind of to say, there's confidence and then there's compassion, and
Mhm,
confidence kind of can go only so far, but with compassion, it's much deeper
mhm,
level of actually like loving yourself and learning that
mhm,
it's okay to be human and you might fall
mhm,
short, but you kind of again like you own that, and it just gives you
mhm,
motivation like, okay, well, I made it this far, I can only now go farther. And so
mhm,
I think when it comes to like learning disabilities or things that someone might be struggling with internally, it's kind of now you have the opportunity to have a healthy conversation with yourself.
mhm. Exactly, and it's something that helps us to reframe the situation and to kind of refocus that energy into something that's really meaningful, not only for ourselves but something that we can share with others. And like I mentioned, when individuals share their stories with me or their journeys about um, whether it's with learning disabilities or mental health or self love and confidence and self-esteem, and there's a difference between confidence and self-esteem. And so it's just it's something that is really fascinating to me because the human mind is so powerful. And so when we are able to really just have these conversations about um, you know hey, I'm struggling today, like normalizing that in society is very hard. But um, that's what I'm hoping to create in the future with through social work, through my clients, and as a person with my peers is just furthering those conversations about normalizing not being okay, or you know what I'm saying, like just
Mhm.
to kind of reduce some of that stigma around self-love or negative talk or just and learning disabilities like that. It's just something that I think um, it goes hand in hand, because when you do have a learning disability, um, self-esteem may go down, confidence may go down. It there's lots of things that play into that.
It's always mind blowing to reflect and kind of remind yourself how interconnected your mind, body, and soul is.
Mm,
Your mind has a lot of power on how you
mhm,
perceive things, how your mood changes, motivation, and everything. And especially within a field like social work, like you said, that self awareness is that sometimes hard to kind of detach yourself from the clients or situations, or is it really easy to kind of create a barrier? I guess my question is, if you're dealing with a case that might be very difficult and you're having a
mhm.
lot of empathy for your client, does that end up weighing down on you ever?
This is a very important question because I think it brings a lot of truth to helping professions. For me personally, I have felt that weight of carrying some of what my client may be going through, but that's when it's really, really crucial and important to set those healthy boundaries. We learn about that all the time in our program in social work, what that looks like to create healthy boundaries, whether it's in our personal lives or whether it's with our clients. That's something that we definitely reflect on, and we engage in conversation in classes. A lot of our um, classes are discussion based. We have textbooks and we understand that book knowledge, but we also really strive to apply it. That's why we do an internship, and so we apply that knowledge into the field, and we also engage in conversation with our peers and our classmates um, about maybe different issues we have in field or what we may be feeling, with maybe a particular client or something. But it definitely goes to show that as an intern and as a social work student, there's peers, my peers or my classmates are also dealing with the same kind of maybe struggle, or they may be dealing with that same weight of working with a client that is close to home, or that really we feel a lot of empathy towards.
Yeah, I think it needs to be made aware that, especially like therapists, psychiatrists, doctors,
Mm-hmm.
they need help too. And
Mm-hmm.
when they're I guess in a position or career path where they're very vulnerable and they are fed a lot, sometimes I guess as society we kind of neglect to remember that they also need resources and help too. So I could only imagine, yeah, the same goes with social work as well.
Yeah, and that you bring up such a valid point, I think, because this is something I was actually talking with with some of my peers and my professor in a class last week. Is that we're learning to help others, and we're in a field where we're engaging with others in their most vulnerable times. Yet we have to understand and realize that, like you said, we're human. We need to refill our cup too. It can't just be pouring and pouring and pouring into others, but also learning to give ourselves grace through filling up our cup, whether that means practicing self-care, whether that means setting those healthy boundaries, which can be a form of self-care, and there's lots of things that go into refilling our cup, and self-love is part of that. I think even when you have that self-talk, that really helps you to um, further further your learning about yourself. That's key. That's so powerful.
Hmm. That what you said right there, I couldn't agree more. Because again, we're all human. We all have needs. We all have boundaries. They might look different for everybody. Like no, not one situation fits everybody. And I think that's also really beautiful too, because everyone is different. And
Mhm.
you can still find a community, but then you still also have your individuality. And I
Mhm.
think that's really beautiful. And like I've been saying again, it's really up to you to own that. And
Mhm.
we don't realize how much we have to offer to everybody. I think
Mhm.
for most of us, we're our own worst critics. I know I am. I'm my own
Mhm.
worst critic. And I don't realize
Mhm.
how much I mean to my friends or even vice versa.
Mhm. That's also a great point. Especially, I think I know when I was growing up, and even now, like, um, it's it's just so um, interesting or fascinating, because when you grow up being so hard on yourself, or being your own critic, or just saying, oh, I could have done better, or oh, being that, maybe as some people say, a perfectionist, or whatever that may be. I think it really can lead to something that we become, or it can lead us to become really critical of ourselves. And what I've learned is that I can have so much grace and empathy and compassion for others, but when it comes to myself, I find that a lot more difficult. I
Mm-hmm.
not giving myself grace, or saying, oh, it's okay if so and so didn't pass the test. Oh, I understand, and they are, just I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
just being able to give others so much grace and compassion and empathy, but not being able to do that for ourselves as well.
Yeah, that in the book I mentioned, she has a chapter on that and says,
Mhm.
like, reflect, how would you treat a friend in this situation?
Mhm.
Is that different to how are you treating yourself now? And if
Mhm.
that is, why is that? Why are you so much more empathetic and understanding to others, but why do you feel like you need to beat yourself up?
Mm.
And at least for me personally, that was really eye opening. And I needed a whole week to reflect on that. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of truth in that sentence.
Exactly. I know that I've been told, even by friends or by family, that if you wouldn't say it to a friend, why would you say it to yourself? And I think that just hearing that statement or that question is something that's mind blowing to me. I really have to take a step back and say, oh, okay. So when I encourage and empower my friends, on decisions, or, they're asking for advice or whatever it may be, um, how come I don't do that with myself? How come I don't give myself that credit, or that pat on the back that's saying, you may not have gotten an A on that test, or you may not have, passed the test, or whatever it may be, but you gave it your best try. You gave
Mhm.
it, and that should be enough.
That's really true. If you can say you gave it as much as you could,
Hmm.
like, you should be so proud. If you're giving it your 100%, that's more than anyone can ask for. So I feel
Hmm.
like most people don't even get to reach that 50%.
Hmm. Hmm.
I want to talk more about your journey into getting to social work. Now you're doing an internship. What were things you were surprised to learn? What were things that have really stuck out with you in your whole career process so far?
So something that really has stood out to me has been how important it is to um, engage in these conversations, even though they may be taboo, or they may be not popular at the moment, or they may be something that people are uncomfortable with, or different things like this. But when I do engage in those conversations, whether it's with my colleagues or my clients, um, I'm starting that wheel turning in their head kind of process. You get the ball rolling. Um, you get people to start to think. And I think that when we allow people to, when we present people with information, it allows them to have access to deeper thinking, if that makes sense. And so
Mhm.
I've done a lot of education through my internship, and so I've done workshops and presentations, and I've educated our community on different topics. And so being able to be in that educator role has really opened my eyes to the different career paths within social work, because there's so much you can do within social work. It's a very broad field, and education is just all part of that. Is one part of that. Mhm.
Mhm. Can you go over more of the different things you've done workshops and talked on?
Mhm. So one of the biggest workshops that I've done actually was I've it was a collaboration between some of our partners and other organizations, and that was on human trafficking. That was a huge workshop that we did. That was a collaborative project we did in January of this year, and with that, there were professionals, there were advocates, there were community members, city council members that were there to really just learn about human trafficking in our communities. It doesn't just happen locally, but it doesn't just happen like globally. It happens locally, and so just being able to learn from others and being able to talk about the things that people sometimes don't want to talk about because it's uncomfortable. So that was one of the workshops I did. Another one, we focused on, it was also on human trafficking. And this was focused specifically just for the agency that I'm interning with. And it was focused on providing resources and prevention strategies, and coming from a holistic approach, and what that looks like from a social work perspective and as an intern. And these are just one of or two of the workshops that I was able to present on and be a part of. And I've also attended workshops and trainings on community violence and what that looks like, and for children, or for our youth that are unaccompanied, or just all these different populations. And it really has opened my eyes and exposed me to um, the things that as humans that people struggle with.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's wow, that's all really interesting.
Mhm.
I think it'd be great to have another conversation at a different time about the human trafficking issue. And
Mhm.
it's I don't think people realize how huge that is even today. That it
Mhm.
There's still so much so much work that needs to be done within that. Have you yet to receive any backlash or maybe some hesitation from different groups or people, especially on topics that are taboo?
Honestly, not too much in my agency. I think that when we are talking about these taboo conversations, we really try to use the terminology that is inclusive and that um, comes from like a neutral standpoint. Our point isn't to um, it's not like a persuasive speech or whatever. It's simply a workshop that people can attend to find out more information on these social issues that are going on in our society today. So personally, I haven't had a lot of backlash or that feedback or anything that um, surrounding these issues.
Oh, that's really good to hear because
Mhm.
I think with different organizations, there might be some resistance to it. And I
Mhm.
think exactly like you said, having that terminology that's inclusive, like not
Mhm.
persuasive, it's just kind of stating the facts and more educational. I think it's the way you say things that can really open up more people's perspective on issues.
Exactly. And oftentimes people, have their own personal opinions or their own biases, or I mean, we all do. It's in our human nature. And so when we come from a standpoint that isn't trying to change someone's mindset, it's presenting information and giving them access to that information, and what they do with it or how they interpret it is kind of up to them. I mean, we can help provide insight through personal experiences maybe, but it's really kind of up to that individual, and giving them that self-determination to interpret the information how they want to or how they see fit, to then share with other people. That's kind of the goal, is just to continue to share with our partners and organizations, so then they can pass along the information to others. So it's like a ripple effect, or like a cycle that keeps you can continuing to educate people.
Hmm. That, that's great. Yeah, I'm excited to see where your career goes. Again, seeing on your social media where you'll continue to keep posting really important issues. And I love that energy you always put out in your posts and your message. And so I was really eager to have you on as a guest for this podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an honor just to continue these conversations. It's wherever we go, it's something that I hope to take with me in the future. Just to
Hmm. Yeah, I think, again, the whole reason for this podcast is to start conversations that aren't happening. I know for me personally, there's just conversations I wish I knew were happening when I was younger and was completely oblivious. And now that I'm older, I realize the importance those would have made to me
Mhm.
5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so now, again, like thanks to you and the other guests I'm going to have on this podcast, I'm very grateful that we're able to create a platform that's a safe space in an educational way versus kind of other platforms where maybe it's very aggressive or demeaning based on like there might not be knowledge, and it's our responsibility, I think, to kind of put that information out there and have it laid on the table, and it's up to people to kind of receive it.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. You can only, I think that you can only go so far as presenting information or education to people, but it really is that individual's own or thought process or own journey to be able to, or what they do with that information, whether they, just kind of brush it aside and that's it, or whether they really run with it and take it somewhere. So that's I think part of what has kind of fueled my fire to continue in social work as well.
Hmm. Well, what are your next goals in social work, or maybe even outside social work? What are things that are on your list of you're going to accomplish this?
Well, after I graduate, my goal is to actually get my master's degree in social work, specifically on the emphasis of macro social work. Like I previously mentioned, it's focused on organizations and communities. And when I get that degree, down the road, it's just continuing to start my own nonprofit. That's kind of the end goal is have a nonprofit that is solely focused on helping our vulnerable populations. The population may shift a little bit. It may, be a different population that I want to work with. But the bigger goal is just to have or create that space, like you said, create
Mm-hmm.
those open doors for people just to come in and to share their journeys, share their stories, and have
Mm-hmm.
that safe platform and space to do so.
That's great. Now I'm curious because I'm a film major and you, for a brief period, were a film major too. Is there any part of you that wants to kind of connect film into social work at all?
That's a great question because that's how I kind of started out. Because when I was a film major, it really was something that I thought I could combine, and then I was like, maybe it's not, maybe it is, and I was kind of going back and forth. Again, that self talk that I was kind of hesitant about, and I honestly think that that would be a brilliant idea. I would love to do that. I think that maybe even with the nonprofit, hopefully that I start in the future, that could be part of it. I think when we have services or organizations where we can connect with others in collaboration, that's where the true change happens. Is when we collaborate
Mm-hmm.
with others and are able to kind of put all of our resources together and work together to be able to change our communities. Mhm.
Oh, that's yeah, I agree with you. I think even with like different career paths, resources, medias, when you're able to collaborate, it creates a whole different realm of outreach opportunities,
Mhm.
messages, and I think if that ends up being what you do later, I think that'll be a really brilliant, fantastic way to help protect, like you said, the vulnerable population or communities.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. I look forward to what the future holds for myself and also for you. So
Thank you. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for sitting down with me for this episode.
yeah, thank you for
I've
having me.
definitely, yeah, I've definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners have learned something too. And is there anything else you would want to mention or share?
Um, I think everything that we talked about today was just perfect in itself because it was real, it was authentic, and it was just being able to share our stories and information that we have learned in education. And so it was really powerful.
I agree. Well, again, thank you. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Complex Like Wine. Again, our guest is Anna Clark, and the organization she mentioned, I'll put a link in the description on whatever app or website you're tuning into. Again, well, all right, thank you so much. It's good to talk and see you.
Yes, it's good to catch up and talk.
Yes. All
Yep.
right. All right. Thank you guys. See you guys next week.